Hi, Jim. Welcome to the Career Changers. The
Thank you for
Career
having me.
Changers, it's an online community that aims to share inspirational stories of career change with the world. And, we sort of met through someone else. So I came to learn your career change story that is really inspiring. And you're here today to share it with our audience. So you're the founder of the Untamed Entrepreneur.
Correct.
So you're living a quite adventurous lifestyle, traveling the world, nomadic life. So how and when did this all started?
Oh gosh. Well, I suppose there's a few different layers to that question, and I talk a lot, so I'll try and keep it concise. I also love talking about myself, so I will have to keep it even more concise. I started this business about 3.5 years ago, and that was the point at which my wife and I started living nomadically, like full time. We moved from Australia, which is where we were living at the time, and then we visited in the first year, something like 10 countries in the first year, and then we slowed down after that. But prior to that, I'd been living in Australia 5 years, Canada 5 years. So I haven't lived full time in England since I was 21. So the adventuring and traveling has been going on a while. The business is about 3.5 years.
So what did you do before starting this adventure? Like you did a career change, so you were busy with other type of activities, profession.
I was, yeah. I ended up becoming the person I said I never would, which is working a 9 to 5, which is never a 9 to 5. It's like an 8 till 6 and chained to a desk. Again, living in Australia, I was ended up running an engineering business. I didn't own it. It wasn't my business, but I was basically managing the day to day and doing the business development stuff. And it was exciting at first. I did that for about 4 years, 3 and a bit years, and it was very exciting at first. A new challenge, I got a company car, I got a phone, I got an office. I felt well swanky, because before that I'd just been living in Canada and I was a ski instructor and a plumber and stuff. So, I had never had those trappings of sort of corporate life before, and the learning curve was massive. A huge mining recession in Australia, so we had to kind of figure our way through that. It was only a very small company, and myself and the owner were making it up as we went along, and it cost us a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of stress. Sort of got through that, but then realized that the cracks started to appear, that this wasn't the future I wanted, and I started to become more tired and bitter and de-energized, and I wasn't inspired in any way by the industry or by the staff that I worked with or the customers that I served. I mean, nice people, but just not my type, not my people. And that started to take its toll. So hence the switch.
Did you think like getting maybe, I don't know, older, I would say, had an impact on the way you were feeling, or there was any specific event in your life that made you think this is not the life I want for myself?
Yeah, it would be much easier if there was just one moment of when it was like, right, this is enough. But like so often in human nature, there's a million different thoughts and decisions and situations that then impact that one decision when it's like, right, enough is enough. And it was a culmination of events. There was that, I attribute it to a couple of moments of like realizations I had, like going to a business seminar and learning about something else, and then seeing other people living nomadically. And just one morning in particular, I referred to when I snoozed like 6 times or whatever, and I was like, oh God. And she was my partner at the time, now my wife. She was leaving for work, and I was normally, in the past, when I was energized and loving what I was doing, I'd been in the office for an hour before she even got out of bed. And now she had gotten out of bed and was leaving for work, and I was still in bed. So the shift was massive, and I was like, holy shit, something's not right here. So yeah, there was definite times when it was like change is necessary, and I started to become the person I didn't want to become, and a bit more resentful to different people and things like that.
Yeah, that's quite a recurrent theme between people that change career. I think it's like you start the corporate life full of excitement, you're younger, and you see all the perks and the advantages. And then probably a certain point, there is a moment of reflection that I believe is also related to us getting older and wondering what we want for ourselves, if our values and the way we feel is aligned with the way we are living. So I think before to do a career change, there is a lot of reflection and soul searching. So how was your process about that? And did you ever think about what were your dreams when you were a child, what you wanted to do, and was this connected with what you decided to do next?
That's a good question. And you know, when people say, well, what did you want to be when you were a kid? When I think of that, I always looked out the windows at the airports and wanted to be the person driving the cars around, towing all the luggage. And ironically, I did become a truck driver in Australia before I got the job running this business. So that didn't really have much of a bearing / any bearing on what I do now. Obviously, I wanted to be a footballer for a certain period of time because that's what your family always ask. Do you want to be a footballer? Yeah. Didn't really. So I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I wasn't one of those typical entrepreneurs who's selling lemonade when they're 8 years old and making millions and setting up their own businesses. Like, I just wasn't that bothered. I did uni, I was boozing a lot, I was having a great time partying. I lived in Whistler for 5 years, same again. Just doing enough to kind of live and have fun. Then Australia came around and it was about being an adult and giving my liver a rest and trying to earn some money for the first time. And then after that, that's when entrepreneurship kind of came through. But the business I'm now running is directly related to the journey I went on. So the journey, the transition that I went on was, okay, enough's enough. I've got to change. And my next chapter, whatever it looks like, is going to be epic. Like, there's lots of things I do in my life quickly and with little thought, but some of the big decisions, they're the ones I say, right, if I'm going to do a job, I do it properly. So what does this look like? What do I want to be doing? Who do I want to be helping? What lifestyle do I want to lead? So I threw myself in with both feet and I invested in the first 18 months, it was something like 20,000 Australian dollars to figuring out me and my past and what I wanted to do and the kind of businesses that I wanted to run. And I surrounding myself with entrepreneurs that I wanted to be like, and audio books and meetings and flying across the world to different events. And I was just taking bits. Okay, that sounds awesome. That sounds average. That didn't work. Oh, what about this? And, reading a million different books and like homing in on which kind of books you want to read more of. And ultimately, I ended up getting a load of clarity. What I was good at, what I loved to do, what inspired me, what energized me, what my lifestyle wanted to be like. And then ironically, the business I now run is helping people go through that exact same process, because I realized the cost of the misalignment that I was on. I drifted away when I was in Australia from who I really was, and that was expensive for me, health-wise, money-wise. And I realized that I was inspired to help people go through that, because so many people, and you'll know this better than most, are living out of alignment with themselves. They're in a job that they don't love, but they've just told themselves that this is what being an adult is all about. And it's about, it's about making money and living day to day, which I think is absolute bullshit. And life is way too short for that. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question about 5 minutes ago, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah. So what were the transferable skills that you've learned from your previous jobs that have helped you during this process of doing a career change? I think sometimes, I see personally that both careers and lives are a process where we learn something and then we can take it to the next steps. But sometimes in the corporate world, there is more of a separation where both recruiters or hiring manager say someone doesn't have maybe a continuous experience, so it cannot fit certain roles. I don't necessarily see it that way. So what were the transferable skills that you learned before and that have helped you in this new career, in this new process?
Yeah, good. I've never really thought about that before on a sort of practical level. I think one of the biggest things I'm thinking now is, as my team is growing, is leadership skills. So I learned a lot about leadership in the previous role from my own style of leadership, but also from the leadership I had received. and also the plumbing job I was doing before that in Canada, like 2 examples of leaders that had some really good elements and some elements that I desperately wanted to avoid being myself. So just homing in, on the kind of leader I wanted to be. That was a big piece of transferable skills. The brilliant thing for me, I suppose the most useful, was the fact that the company I was running was only small. So everybody had to wear many hats. And as the kind of, running the business, I was doing the BD and then the operations and the finance, and I was helping with estimations and like every aspect of the business, financial reporting. So I got a sample of every single element of the business. And obviously not all of it I love to do, and not all of it am I particularly good at. But I was exposed to that. And when you run your own business, it's exactly the same. You've got to do those elements to some degree. And so that was a major one. And people in large corporations don't necessarily have that viewpoint. But then I suppose if you're not transferring into entrepreneurship, it's less impactful.
Yeah. So now you set up 3 years ago the Untamed Entrepreneurs. And what did you do exactly? Who are you helping?
So I'm helping people who are at a stage in their life, at a sort of fork in the road. So a very similar audience to your audience. People who are going, right, enough is enough. I've got more to add. There is more to life than just collecting a paycheck and just going through it a 5 out of 10. So my audience is people who are ready to change. They've got a high drive. They've got an entrepreneurial spirit, and a lot of them, but not all of them. A lot of them we're helping with just career change stuff as well. But they've got a zest for life, which has been dulled over time, and they want to rekindle that. They've often got a high performing mentality, which is regardless, whatever they're doing, they want to be really good at it. They want to continue to grow. So I help them through that transition, whether it's from one business to another, from corporate to business, from corporate to another type of corporate, whatever it is. That's the transition I help people with. So I suppose age-wise, it's like 30 to 45. And with it, the biggest thing that unites them all is that insatiable appetite for wanting to get more out of life.
So if I'm supposedly, I come on your website, I went to check your website, of course. I see there is a test. I'm going to do this test, and then I get in touch, and I want some help. So what would be the process? What sort of work would I have to do on myself? How long would that be before I can achieve some results?
So the process would be, let's say you either do the test or you read a newsletter, or however you enter, get in touch with me. We then have a call. We have a strategy call where it's never 45 minutes really. It's like an hour and a half, where we dive deep. I'll ask you a million questions as to your past, what inspires you, what are you afraid of. We'll uncover some belief systems and limiting beliefs. And we'll get an idea of what inspires you and what your mission may be. We'll sort of scratch the surface on that, and then we'll say, okay, well, if this is a fit, if you're committed, I'm committed, so let's work this out. Let's start. And in terms of the packages I offer, minimum, there's a group program which is minimum 4 months. If it's one-on-one, it's minimum 6 months. So to answer your question of what work would you need to do on yourself, the answer is as much as you possibly can to support the process that you would go through with me, because there's only so much I can do. And it's about learning. It's about being open to share, about being vulnerable, about being willing to think of things in a new way. It's about, reading new books, hearing new types of things, elevating your environment, for surrounding yourself with people who are where you want to get to. And then in terms of the speed of that process, that's something that is, how long is a piece of string? And the biggest sort of identifier I could say is, how much do you want it? Because Tony Robbins says we don't get what we want, we get what we have to have. And for people who just, I'd quite like to change, I'm kind of a bit meh about my job, but something out there, I'd quite like to do something cool, like that's not enough. And especially with the investment required to work with me, time-wise and financially, it's the biggest indicator is like, holy shit, I can't do anything else. This is a must for me. And that's the stage I got to in my journey. It was like, I cannot imagine carrying on doing what I'm doing. I've created a vision for myself and it's a must. Like, I have to get there. There's no other way. And that's what keeps you going when it's through the tough times. That's what makes you make the difficult decisions. And that's what keeps the energy going.
Yeah, that's quite a common theme between people that change career. I think, well, in my experience, for the sort of people I talk to and I meet, I think probably the majority of people think about changing at times. But the reality is that then you have to go through challenges, like especially probably one of the biggest one is the financial challenge, transitioning from a place that I called fake security, where you're sure that you're gonna get your next paycheck, to not being sure what's gonna happen next. And also probably, let's say, like what the environment or other people expect from us, because we are surrounded by people that have expectation towards us in our roles or in our responsibilities. So do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I massively agree with you. And the one thing you said, it's like the analogy I use is like it's like scales. They say in software, if you're going to try and sell a company, let's say it's a company, you're going to try and sell them your software and they're already using an existing software. Your software has to be like 7 to 10 times better than the incumbent one for them to bother switching to yours, because of the switching costs, the unknowns, the obstacles they've got to overcome. And it's exactly the same with a career change. Like, your new thing, that idea in your head, has to be significantly more attractive to you than your current status quo. Otherwise, you won't overcome those obstacles that you described. The financial fears, the unknown, the fear of judgment from those around you, the fear of change. Often we resort to better the devil you know. So that's why it's so important to quantify the cost of your current state, i.e. how bad is my current job? And it's not just to make yourself feel bad for the sake of it, but actually to be honest with yourself and say, no, I am miserable doing what I'm doing. I am capable of more. Then if you can quantify that, coupled with realizing how awesome the next chapter could be, what amazing job opportunities or business opportunities there are out there, and what the lifestyle could be around that, then those scales start to tip, and that's when the jump becomes a lot easier, because it goes from being a want into a must.
Yeah. So while this year has been quite erratic for everyone, how did it go for yourself? And have you been impacted in any way by the coronavirus situation? How did you manage to go through with your business?
So we were living in Bansko, in a ski resort in Bulgaria, when lockdown happened, and Bulgaria responded quicker than the UK. So we were in lockdown like 2 weeks earlier, and we were living right on the edge of the mountains. So we had the view of the mountains, we were right on the edge of the woods and all that stuff. So we were very grateful to be living there, because we had space, we had nature, we could just go on walks. Obviously, there's no issues with isolation when you're in the forest. So that was huge. And then we were due to leave there at the end of April, then it became the end of May, then it became the end of June because of flights being cancelled. So in that respect, yes, we were impacted, but we were so grateful to be stuck there rather than stuck in a city somewhere. And I know the UK laws were obviously, up and down and changing a little bit, and people in the cities were struggling. So we were very grateful for that. Business-wise, I had a slow month in May, but March was awesome. April was good. June was really good. July was even better. So I think that's a culmination of the business just generally maturing, and also people realizing the coronavirus. What I say, and this may sound offensive to anyone, and this is not in any way supposed to be disrespectful, because I know how many people genuinely suffered. But the coronavirus, in my opinion, it didn't necessarily create cracks. It highlighted cracks that already existed.
Yeah.
So divorce rates went up through the roof. People in their jobs, all of a sudden, people living in a flat in London, all of a sudden realized, oh crap, I want more space. They may have wanted that before, but they weren't necessarily noticing it. And the same with jobs, like, oh, right, okay, I actually don't necessarily love this job, and I love the idea of working from home and having more flexibility. So it just highlighted things that we may have known subconsciously anyway. So I think that contributed to the business not being hugely impacted, because of course we were helping people with that transition.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see what happened during this year. And I do believe, especially in big cities like London, where people maybe, really live like the corporate life to an extreme. I think what happened helped a lot of people to realize what life is meant to be, what, is more meaningful for them. And what is interesting now is to see how things will progress. And if something will change effectively, or if we go back just to the old normal. Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. People have short memories, and like there's been many financial crises in the past, and so many things revert back to the way before. So like you say, it'll be interesting to see if there is a new normal, and I think there will be a new normal. I'm hoping that people's connection, that people realizing the importance of connection and nature and space in particular, I hope those things remain, and I hope those things don't just go back to the way they used to be, where people disregarded them to some extent.
So one of the few final questions, how has your life changed since you've changed career, you're doing something you love, and also you're living in different countries? So what is that give you stability? How do you feel about this new life?
I can't even begin to describe the difference. I mean, I created this sort of vision for myself when I was like 4 years ago or whatever, of living nomadically and exploring a city in the morning or a town or whatever, and then working with cool clients in the evening. And when I was in the middle of the corporate sort of spiral down for myself, I was like, it doesn't feel possible. But then within a year or so, I was living it, and it's like, it's just a realization that this is what life is supposed to be about. It's about doing the things that you love. It's about having a life full of wants, not full of shoulds. And it's just the flexibility, the ability to explore where we want to explore, the fulfillment above all else from the connection that I have with my clients and the impact that I can make and that they let me make is absolutely phenomenal. And all that does is pain me even more when I see people who don't have that. Because I say it is possible, because I'd never had any formal training in what I'm doing. I had no experience in what I'm doing. It didn't stop me moving towards it. It took time and effort, and it cost a lot of money to do that. But if life is too important not to do that, rather than just sticking on the same path, the status quo. So that's the biggest realization for me, is that there is no other way. Like it's so important to cultivate this kind of lifestyle, and it's just the difference from what it used to be is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's very inspirational. And I think for everyone that is trying to change career, it's really important to hear these stories and to know that, you need to overcome many challenges and to remember what you're aiming for. Generally, the reason why people change career is because they need to find a new meaning in their
100%.
life. And it's not anymore about feeling, a CV or climbing the corporate ladder. I mean, that's good. Absolutely. If that's what someone feels to do. But it's also important to live according to our own values and beliefs.
Absolutely. And being honest with ourselves as to how we actually feel right now. And I found a quote the other day, or I remembered a quote the other day. It's like, because a lot of people, they want to change, but then they say, well, I can't because of X, Y, and Z. And then they will defend those reasons why they can't. And the quote is, and I'm going to butcher this, but if you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. But if you argue for your opportunities, you get to create them. So when you say, well, or when your audience says, well, I want to change, but just listen to what those buts are. And it takes no more effort to argue for the reasons why you could do it than it does to argue for the reasons why you can't. So you may as well put the energy towards why you can.
So I'm going to ask you a question. You may not have the answer because we haven't rehearsed this interview at all.
Go for it.
So do you have any tips for someone that's feeling very scared about doing something?
Yeah, I would say, Tim Ferriss calls it fear setting. And I don't know the process exactly, but just sit down and write down or talk with a loved one or whoever you trust, or both, and say, what am I really afraid of? Because we're very adept at coming up with all the reasons why we shouldn't do it and all of the fears. And then we'll just argue those, like I just said, and then we'll create a narrative where it's not possible, and we won't allow ourselves to see those opportunities. So just write them down and say, what am I really afraid of? Am I afraid of fear of judgment? From who? Okay, is that something I want to continue to let affect me, or can I break through that? What about if I had a discussion with that other person? What about if I told them where I was coming from? Then we can start to realize that these fears that we perceive as being so impactful and enormous and insurmountable, we realize that actually a lot of them are just made up. And I have this with my clients all the time. We stand there and we just create a barrier around ourselves. Can't go that way, whoop, bang. And it was them that put the barrier up. And I turn around, no, can't go that way because there's a barrier, there's an obstacle in the way. And it's ourselves that create those barriers. It's nobody else. Yes, sometimes we have an environment that's not conducive to change, but are you going to let that stop you? Yes, sometimes we may not have as much money as we want, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can get things running side by side. So look at the fears, realize if they're perceptions or if they're genuine, and 90% of them will be complete bullshit. And then start crafting this new life, start creating a vision for where you want to be, what lifestyle you want to be, who you want to be. Do you want to be traveling? Do you want to be exploring? Do you want to be working with awesome people? Do you want to be spending more time with family? And start to fall in love with that vision. And then you will start moving towards it. And I know that may sound woo-woo, and I thought the same thing when I did it, but it's true. There's brain chemistry behind it, our reticular activating system, and a few other bits, which I won't get into, but we will start to notice opportunities and we will start to move towards those opportunities.
Well, I think those are great tips. Do you have any last pearl of wisdom to share with the career changers?
I would say I think I'm going to emphasize the importance of honesty, and honesty for the people who are more misaligned right now than they care to admit. Be honest with yourself, be radically honest with yourself and say, am I actually a bit miserable here? Am I a 5 out of 10? And if so, do I want to stay as a 5 out of 10? And then for the people who claim to want to change, but aren't taking any action towards it, be honest with yourself and say, why are you not taking action? Because if you can take that responsibility back, rather than blaming anybody else or external forces, if you can take that responsibility back and say, I do want to change, but I am afraid, and I haven't changed yet because I have chosen not to, then you're honest with yourself at that point, and that's when you can reclaim the responsibility. And when you do that, you can reclaim your power. So just be radically honest with your current situation, and that is going to allow you to be more powerful in whatever decision you want to make, whether it's staying or going, but it's your choice at that point.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's been very inspirational to hear your story and all your tips and suggestions. Also, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Best way is they can check out my website, untamedentrepreneurs.com, or we have a Facebook community. Also just type in Untamed Entrepreneurs. It's a Facebook group. They can join that, and there's like free workshops. We do live coaching sessions, all that kind of good stuff, all for free. So through the website, they can take the alignment test. They can join my newsletter. They can email me. Yeah, any of those ways.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.